are listening to The Bell Post. Welcome to the 39th episode of The Bell Post. And I don't know what's going to happen today because we've got Scott Walstad joining us. Scott,
anything's possible.
Welcome to the podcast.
It's a pleasure, Mr. Good.
We're calling this episode the Texas legislative session that was, that is, and that will be, because we're still not done. It's still ongoing.
It hasn't finished.
How long have you been the legislative committee chair for PBT?
I have been.
Were you proposing the legislation for Cain and Abel's transaction?
Basically, no. Since 2007, when John McCluskey became president, I became vice president. And then, whether I wanted to or not, he made me become legislative committee chairman over my protests, but he cleared it through my mother, so I had to do it.
Well, I was going to say, you're a second generation bondsman.
I am.
You grew up with the renowned, the famous, the infamous Marge Walstad.
I won't comment on that, but she is renowned. Yes. No. So I've been doing it since 2007, for the exception of the 4 years when I was president.
We've done a podcast with Tillman Welch, who was the previous legislative committee chair, was the legislative committee chair for a long time. But I mean, I think you would even say you were trained by Tillman.
Tillman's shoes were very big to fill.
They're about 5'9". They're not that big.
Well, he wears big boots, and I still can't. As much as I try, I still can't get the handlebar mustache going on.
Oh, don't try.
And so, no, Tillman was great, and I learned a lot from him while he was legislative committee chairman, because I was on the committee at that time. But even more so, learned a lot from him after I became legislative chairman, because I could always go back to him and ask him questions and talk ideas and what do I need to do. So he's been great. Still do it to this day.
Well, and you've been the chairman of the Dallas County Bail Bond Board for a long time now, for several years.
I think we're going on maybe 6. About 6 years. 6 or 7.
So some people must like you because you're the, former president of PBT, legislative committee chair, chairman of the Bail Bond Board for Dallas County. I mean, whoa. I mean, how have you fooled so many people? Because I know you.
People just like to appoint me to unpaid positions.
Okay, well, we're here today to talk about the legislative session that just took place. But if you were to just kind of sum up this session that we've had and that these two special sessions we have, how would you summarize this? What stood out to you in this session?
It's been volatile. There's been a lot of bickering back and forth between the two houses. Obviously, homestead exemption situation has been a big issue because of the state budget. The increased amount in the surplus that the state has had, record amounts. And, even prior to the session, I was speaking with Senator Royce West, and it was all about getting money for their districts. And I'm sure that goes across the board. Everybody wanted their piece of the pie. Obviously, there were some social justice issues that came full frontal in the session that took a bunch of time. So it's just been a long, arduous process.
Well, you left out the impeachment tough. That also sucked up a lot of oxygen for a while.
Well, you got to remember the impeachment situation really didn't come up until the very last week of the session. Mm-hmm. They had some other issues with a representative that they expelled that that took up a little time. But the impeachment process really didn't start till the very end. So I don't know if that took up a bunch of oxygen of the rest of the session.
Well, I know to me what stood out for this legislative session, and I know this is silly, but we have this plan. We go to the session. If they're in session, we are there so many days a week. But I just remember, we have 2 rooms that we have at the hotel and 4 beds, but somewhere during the session, someone
Don't
got
do
this
it.
bright
Don't
idea
do it.
that we were going to get adjoining rooms, and it was the cold room and the hot room. And one night I woke up at 2 in the morning and I was convinced somebody had come in my room and cooled the temperature down because I have to be in the warm room. And I got up in the middle of the night and I walked over there and nobody had touched it. And I was like, oh, thank God. But then being the juvenile I am, I was like, well, I can sneak into their room and play with their thermostat.
You're
And then it was
such a
just
juvenile.
stupid kid things the whole rest of the session.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, we have we enjoy going down to Austin. I mean, we enjoy being part of the process, which we are. But we enjoy our time away from the capital also. Although all that time spent probably in the hotel room, we really don't do much other than go get something to eat.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember I told you that I read a study or heard a study that the best temperature to sleep in was 67 degrees, and you didn't believe me. And then
Yeah.
you had to look it up, and I was right.
Well,
Just
I
like
do not
always.
admit that. I deny that to this day. That's not
Well,
true.
just like always, you always say when it comes to anything going on with the legislature, the buck stops with me, and I
Oh,
call the
yeah.
shots, and you didn't even believe me on the 67 degrees.
Well, and what you're talking about there is when we're in session and when we're getting ready for session, you are the legislative committee chair is the final say, has the final say on many things. And so talk about briefly, how do we get ready to go into a legislative session? Because we really do a lot before the session even starts.
Well, we start preparing for the session probably the second that the previous session is over. We talk about the things that transpired during the session, good or bad. Um, and we start as a committee. We have our annual meeting in October, which is coming up, and we'll get together at that time and start talking about different pieces of legislation that either we think will come forward or we think we want to try to get passed. Obviously, over the last couple sessions, we've kind of been in a defensive mode. Um, but we progressed through that for a year and a half. We have our October meeting, a January meeting, a meeting in March, and then another meeting in the next October. So we'll have 3 to 4 meetings to discuss legislation.
2 sessions ago, we did something that we've never done before. We put together a notebook which kind of summarized all the different
Mm-hmm.
bail issues that we saw across the country, and also kind of proposed a bill or provided a proposed bill to address issues in what we thought would be coming as a bail reform statute. And do you think that putting together that notebook and going through that process was a benefit or a detriment?
Oh no, it's great. Whenever we can provide information to legislators or staff ahead of time, it's a great benefit to us. I mean, anytime we can get them on or get us on their radar, I should say, um, it's a benefit. These are all resource people, and the sooner we can get on their radar where they can communicate with us prior to the session and get our ideas and have that two-way conversation about issues going into the session, it helps tremendously.
We'll talk briefly about how technology has impacted the legislative team, because you've been around long
Wow.
enough where technology was carrying around notebooks to today where we have our Dropbox, our Google Drive and shared stuff. And
It's been light speed. I mean, I remember when I started in 2007, um, I carried around a 4-inch 3-ring binder with all the bills that we were tracking. And throughout every week, I would have to go into TLO to get updates on any bills. And I'm pulling bills out and putting in the new language and so on and so forth. And then the next session, all of a sudden, you start seeing people with laptops and things of that sort. And it's just, it's really that 140 days of the session has really been truncated down to where everything happens so fast and you can see things so fast. Um, and maybe to those people, I mean, we subscribe to an online service called Telecon, which gives us updated information daily, minute by minute, anything that happens with a bill. And we go in every session. We have the dearly departed Glenn Strickland used to do this. He was our guru of tracking bills. Um, and since he departed, we've had Paul Shooter and
Yes.
Sylvia Sanchez. They've done a great job looking at bills this session. And, a lot of people think, well, it's not that big a deal. I mean, they're reading thousands of bills every day. You have to remember, there are over 8,000 bills that get filed every session. We have to go in, like when we have our meeting in January, we determine what are going to be our keyword searches, what are the different statutes that we're going to follow, anything that we're going to need to track. And then they read every one of those bills, and they send those to myself and members of our legislative team. We'll read all those bills, and anything that we think is going to affect us negatively or positively, we track all those bills. So if anything changes, if there's a if there's a committee meeting, we're notified. We go, and then as it goes through the process, that's how we do it. I mean, it's totally different than it was in 2007, just 16 years ago.
So when we're faced with an issue, and how do we keep our membership informed about what's going on, and how do we get them involved during the legislative session?
Well, we have done a couple different things over the last. Actually, we just started this last session, but we try to send out updates to our membership, our legislative committee, our legislative liaison committee. Um, we don't want to scare them because we can inundate them with a whole lot of information. So we try to pinpoint the issues that we think that they're going to want to know about, get them to it. But the one thing that we developed or started using last session was a mass email. And then when an issue comes up, that system, we can send out a mass email to just a committee. We can send it to the entire legislature, whether it be the House or the Senate. Um, and then we really try to get our members, and we tell them, we've been telling them for over 16 years, if you're in the bond business, you need to be in the business of getting to know your House rep and your senator and your local, county commissioners and the county judge and those kind of things. It's all about politics, and we call it politics. Okay. And, a lot of our members do a very good job of knowing who their people are. And then during the session, when we usually try to have a day at the Capitol or maybe 2 days at the Capitol so that they can go around and see their House reps, they can see their senators and talk to them specifically about the issues that are addressing, our industry. And then obviously, anytime that we have a hearing come up, we send that information to all of our members so they can come to the Capitol if they so wish and try to talk to those individuals that might be on the committee or may not be on the committee. um, to talk to them about specific pieces of legislation that are in front of that committee. That
Well, when we talk about, PBT's call to action, click to dial system, which is
yeah.
very new. I mean, we had a first generation thing we tried last session, and now we have a state of the art system. But we kind of have pioneered this email system. I mean, we went into offices this year, and members were telling us exactly how many emails they had received on that call to action.
Well, no, you beat me to the punch a little bit. I won't say the actual member's name, but we went in that morning and the staffer had his computer on, and he turned around and you could see
Mm-hmm.
on his computer all the emails he had gotten in reference to that particular bill. And it was just all the way up and down. And you'll remember, he goes, y'all didn't have anything to do with all these emails we had on this particular bill. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
I think I've been thinking about our email system recently, and it's something that we hope we don't have to use, because
Well,
we hope that we're not faced with a negative bill, but you sure need it. It's you have very limited time when you realize, hey, we need this and we need it really quickly.
well, you were talking about how technology has changed. So I'm kind of going back a little bit, but I'll bring it forward. Back in the day, which wasn't too long ago, when we went in and talked to someone, they would say, well, get us your talking points, get us what you've got, and you'd print them off, and we get you to do talking points or a white paper, and then you'd get it to us and we'd print it off and we'd go around to every office and see all the staffers, and they'd take it and put it in the file folder for that particular bill. The difference now is when you go in to see them, they go, you got a white paper, you got talking point, just email it to us.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want the paper. It's just email it to us. Now, having said that, you still have some old school kind of members, and we've got addressed with this session.
Well, we made
They
inroads with one. I mean, one of the legislators, the representatives that was the biggest help to us,
yeah,
he did not like getting the mass emails, and we
no,
took him off of the list, so he no longer received them.
that's
And
right.
he was, I would say he was grateful enough that when we needed information, he was more than happy to give it to us.
Sure.
So, I mean, it works both ways.
Yeah, I mean, you've just got some of those legislators that they've been there a while and they still want to do it old school. They want a handwritten note. They want you to come by or send them a note or a personal email. They don't want a mass
Mm-hmm.
email type situation. That's why we removed them off of that distribution list.
Well, let's talk about our click to dial system. That was this session was the first time we've ever used that. It just was just now developed. And so
Mm-hmm.
it was it was an idea that someone had come up with and used in another state. And so we decided we'd try to develop it or design it from scratch. And so
Sure.
it allows us to create what I call a 3 sentence script. So, and then it creates a website or a web page that you can then send links to our membership, or you can just take that the link and send it to members, and then when they click on it, it pulls up a list of the group we've created.
Sure.
Representatives, a committee, and you can just go down the list, click on each one, it calls them, and then you can tell them the script. I'm calling about this bill. We oppose it for this reason, and thank you. And then you go to the next one. And so this is the first session that we've ever used that. Can you talk about that briefly?
I think it's worked great. Any kind of personal interaction that you can have between constituent and legislator or legislative staff is extremely helpful. I mean, we always, always, always try to contact our members, in particular, um, constituents of those members that are members of a committee, whether it be in the House or whether it be in the Senate, um, especially if any bill reaches a floor, whether it be the House floor or the Senate floor. We want them to, if they have a personal relationship with that senator or that representative, we want them to reach out to them.
Well, one of
And
the things
that
I think
works
we
well.
do year round is we want to know who has a relationship or who knows
Right.
which senator, which representative, because the hardest thing to do is to get in the room to tell your story. And what people don't realize, their personal relationship with their representative, their senator, is what gets us in the room so that we can then tell the industry story. And
Sure.
that's very important.
And a lot of people are nervous about
Mhm.
going in and talking to their representative or talking to their senator. You know, I think we were all faced with that, back in the day when we started doing this. And I think we've done a good job of telling our members, we just need you there. Get us in the door, make the introduction, and we'll take it from there.
Well, and
Okay.
the best I've ever seen is someone goes in and says, "Oh, Representative so and so, it's so good to see you again. It's been how long?
Sure.
Thank you so much for seeing me. And let me introduce you to my good friend, Scott Walstad. And he has an issue he wants to talk to you about."
Or can good.
But yeah, and that's all they have to do. And then we take over.
Yeah.
And if we have 3 minutes, we have 5 minutes, we have 2 minutes, we'll tell the story in that length of time.
Well, you know what? I mean, we talk about 2 or 3 minutes, but once we finally get in the door
Mhm.
and we start talking to them, it's usually at least 10. And then sometimes it can turn into 30. And those are both legislators that are pro bail or negative bail. I mean, we have an interesting story to tell, and we
Sure.
have an interesting perspective to tell. And much like we talk about, no one really knows what we do.
Mhm.
So when you can get in the door and actually explain to them, this is what we do.
I've used this as an example a couple of times. My youngest daughter has TAR syndrome, and the first article I ever read about it said there was 60 reported cases ever in Canada. The point that the article made is no doctor you see will ever know TAR syndrome as well as you, the parents, do. And
Yeah.
I've thought of that many times because no representative, no senator knows our issues better than we do.
No, you're absolutely correct. I mean, what's the one question they always ask? How does this affect my district?
Mhm.
That's what they want to know.
Well, now
Okay.
with the pandemic, with COVID-19, we have so many studies that have come out, so many reports that have come out. I mean, we have a lot of things to say in answer to that question. How does that affect you? Well, if you go down this road, crime will increase.
You're
And
right.
we know that because that's what happened in New York and that's what happened in California. And we have a report from California that now says that if you do more of personal bonds, simple release, you're increasing violent offenses by the chances of 200%. And
I mean,
why would you do that?
you brought up a good point. Excuse me. I think all this stuff that all these articles that come out from whether it be New York, California, Chicago, they really help us drive home the point of we don't want to, however you want to put it, we don't want a California our Texas, we don't want New York our Texas, we don't want a Chicago our Texas. Okay. Um, we are, when you break it all down, we are a red meat.
Mhm.
There needs to be consequences for your actions. Okay. So I really think the things, unfortunately for those communities, they're unfortunate, but it does help our messaging to the people in Austin.
Well, and sometimes the news is reporting something as if it's some big event, and we know what the reality is. Like in Illinois, they're reporting right now, well, they just got rid of bail,
Sure.
and we know from inside the industry, no, they didn't get rid of bail. They got rid of surety bonds years ago. What we're
Years
talking
ago.
about, they just got rid of cash bonds, and cash bonds we know is the worst of both worlds for the courts because they're relying upon the income from the cash bonds when there's a failure to appear to run operations. And so they're relying upon the failure of people to appear. They need people to fail to appear so that they can take the money to fund operations, because and that's what they're doing. And so what they're doing now is their failure to appear rate is going to go skyrocket, and now they don't have the money that they were getting to fund operations. And so it's the worst of both worlds. Things are just going to be going into even further chaos than they already were in Chicago. And it seems like that's the whole purpose, just to further decriminalize crime that has been decriminalized in Chicago for many, many years.
And you have mass exodus of people from those areas leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Come south. I don't know where some of them are coming here. Okay. They could be going to Florida, but you read story after story after story of the mass exodus of people leaving California, New York, coming south.
Well, I'm thinking about writing an article. I like to write articles periodically, and I kind of want to the theme I'm thinking about is the 4 phases of destroying your urban city, because it starts with, hey, we feel safe, so we need to be more forgiving on crime. And look what they did in California, and they changed from felonies to misdemeanors for certain that. So, and then in the urban areas they said we're not going to prosecute anymore. So first we're forgiving, second we quit prosecuting, third crime goes up, and then once crime goes up, property values go down, people start leaving. But then it's the spiral of death, because then you don't have the tax revenue to take care of the people. You got stores closing, mom and pops who are retiring, who've been there forever, who can't afford to leave. They can't get their medications anymore on the corner. And so it just becomes a big old spiral. And I don't know what stops it. I mean, what stops it? Collapse is where we're doing what we're doing
What a
currently.
wicked web we weave.
Well, let's go back and talk about the legislature. So
Sure.
when the legislative session starts in January, they can normally start filing bills in when? The November before?
November. The pre-filing starts in November.
And so
Um,
so the legislative session starts in January. We can start reviewing bills the November before. And then when are committees assigned?
Committees are assigned as soon as a speaker is elected.
Okay.
Um, we haven't had a real speaker election to speak of for a couple sessions. Speaker Phelan, I mean, obviously this last I can't recall. There was someone that ran against him for speaker. Um, I will not mention his name for public edification. But I mean, it didn't last very long. He was elected within the week of the session. Um, and then generally, once the speaker gets elected, um, there's a time period by which all the members put in their cards for what committees they want to be put on. Those committees are appointed by seniority. Um, First, there are speaker appointments, there are seniority appointments to committees. Once those committees get assigned, um, they'll have pre-committee meetings, just like just a general meeting ahead of time before they start receiving bills. Um,
Well,
and then
you've mentioned the House, but the Senate follows kind of a similar procedure, and the Senate has committee appointments, and those probably come out before the House usually.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Senate operates completely different from the House. As we know, the Senate can suspend any rules that they have. The House generally does not do so. It would take something very acute to get them to suspend a rule.
Well, we're going to
Um,
get to that in a minute, but let's talk
okay.
about time. What is the importance of time?
You have to remember the session is 140 days. Um, Committees, I believe, cannot start hearing bills till 60 days after the session starts, or the 60th day. So on the 60th day, that is when committees can meet and start having hearings on bills. Time is of the essence. That's all we talk about, whether it's you and I, our group that goes down to Austin. Time, 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 time. Okay. Um, you know, there again, I said earlier, there are 8,000 bills that get filed. I mean, we have three major committees that our bills could go to: criminal jurisprudence, corrections, um, um, county affairs. Those are our three major committees. So
Well, on the
we're
House
falling
side, and then on the
on
Senate
the
side,
House
it's
side.
just one committee,
Yes.
usually.
Criminal justice. Okay. So these three committees we have to monitor, look and see any of our bills that we're tracking that get assigned to a committee. Um, Generally, all bills, once heard in committee, will at least be held pending, which usually is at least another week before a vote is taken. A lot of bills, there may be a committee substitute, which has to be presented to the committee before they vote on it. That could be a week, it could be 2 weeks. And so every day that goes past, then we start getting closer to deadlines in the House. There's a deadline for committees to get bills voted out of committee to get them on the House floor or to go to corrections. I mean, not correction, calendars, I'm sorry. Okay. Then there's a deadline for calendars to meet to get bills, the final bills on the floor. These are all deadlines that we have to think about, whether we're talking about bills that we file or bills that we're opposed to or we're negative on, one way or the other.
Well, you've talked about the difference between the Senate and the House, and the Senate can just about waive any rule that they
Right.
live under, but the House is very different. And what impact does a point of order have in the House?
Well, obviously, the House and the Senate both have a parliamentarian. Um, any member in the House or the Senate can call a parliamentary, procedure issue. That could range from anything from, the heading isn't germane to the text of the bill. It can even have issues with any amendments that get placed on. If a member wants to put an amendment, on a bill, we got to check. They can raise a parliamentary question. It doesn't match. I mean, you have to really, and to be honest with you, I am not a parliamentarian, you know, expert by any means whatsoever. Um, but we know the basics enough to know whether something is going to be germane or not.
Well, we've
Um,
seen multiple bills get a point of order sustained on the House
sure.
floor. And then when it's sustained, what does that mean?
Well, it's dead.
Mhm.
We've had previously in the past, you know, there have been some bills, which I won't go into specifics, but, we've actually had them killed before they ever even got up to the front mic because we gave, a member some procedural questions or parliamentarian questions that they then went, you know, to that member and said, we've got some issues and we're going to raise these issues, and it just gets pulled off.
Well, as we were going into this session, we were expecting really kind of two issues to be focused on. Number one was kind of the SB6 cleanup. We were hearing from
Mm-hmm.
Senator Huffman's office that she wanted to do some tweaks to what SB 6, which was passed the session before. And also, we believe that she would make another run at the constitutional amendment that she's been pushing for, to expand pretrial detention. And then we were concerned about whether there would be a second bill from, Ann Johnson, the Whitmire, and Senator
Third.
Whitmire.
Yeah.
Yeah, third bill coming from Representative Ann Johnson and Senator Whitmire, kind of
Yes.
trying to codify a local rule from Harris County. And the Ann Johnson filed her bill really early, but that bill didn't seem to make sense. I mean, that looked like a placeholder bill when we first saw it. Can you talk about what a placeholder bill is?
Well, I mean, think of it as it's the nuts and bolts of a section of a statute or a bill, if have you. But what they want to do later is completely change that part of the statute. So that's file a bill that has to do with XYZ section of the penal code or the code of criminal procedure or the occupations code. And then that way they can get a hearing. And that's kind of the thing that we deal with is that when you have a hearing, you have a hearing on that particular bill, but they can announce to the committee that they have a committee substitute. So we're there to testify on what we see and what we know of. But once we testify and they say they have a committee substitute 2 weeks later, it could be a completely, utterly, totally different bill. And
What
once public testimony is done, they don't have more public testimony on that committee substitute.
When I saw House Bill 227 by Ann Johnson, we had questions about immediately about whether it actually did what she wanted it to do. But we've had a kind of, I'm not going to say a negative history, but we've had a little bit of history from her, or I have, because the last session, when she's saying negative things about me personally on the floor of the House or in a committee hearing, and she's mentioning about my name and it's not positive, that's kind of intimidating, isn't it?
Well, one, I think she really likes you. I
No.
mean, I really do. I mean, isn't that what being an attorney and is all about? There are two different opinions, whether you're on one side or whether you're on the other. Because okay, I think we can actually have her be our friend. Not necessarily our friend, but at least someone we can go to and have a conversation with. This isn't just reserved to just Ann Johnson.
It's kind of the
She
rest of the
is,
story, because
I mean,
after the hearing, when we got to tell our story, our questions, and raise our issues about the bill, she wanted to meet, and she was very smart. She was amenable to our suggestions, and I mean, you would think we did kind of a full circle on her. I mean,
well, you got to remember, like last session, her only interaction with you was during the special,
mhm.
okay, and that was dealing with Senator Huffman's bill, and you know she came right out. She was going to spite you one way or the other.
Well,
Okay,
but I like to
which
say
is
no matter
okay.
what you do, we're going to be respectful, and we're
Oh, we always are. I mean,
And
we
so
always are.
I
Hey,
would hope that would be one of the things you remember. Now, I just want to pause for a minute and say, based upon your theory, well, that means that she must like you. Well, there's a House member that you had an incident with on the well of the House who must
okay.
really
Yes.
like you. Why don't you
Well,
talk
I'm
about
not
that?
wearing that shirt right now. Well, okay. It was last session. Do you want me to really tell this whole story?
Yeah, I want to talk about what the
Okay.
well of the House is, and I don't know if I want to
Okay.
mention names, but
Well,
the incident.
it's okay. So it's the pit. It's outside the House, chamber. And if for all those that don't know, I mean, you can actually go to just outside the House, entrance, and you can go to the pages and you can ask for them to bring a House member out. And so we were in the cafeteria, and some people went up to pull a particular representative out to talk to him about a particular piece of legislation. And so I get a phone call, and they go, "Well, he's coming out. You need to get up here to the pit." And so I went to the pit, and I don't think you were there, were you?
No, I was hiding.
No. Well, I know my good friend, our good friend John McCluskey was there, along with one of our lobbyists. And let's just say it got very loud. Um, some illicit words may have been spoken, not by me. And it lasted about 5-10 minutes. And they talk about how news spreads in the
Yeah.
building very quickly. So for those of you that don't know, it only takes about 7 minutes to get from the House chamber down to the cafeteria. And so I walk downstairs because everyone knows you can't take the elevators because you have to wait. So I walk downstairs to the cafeteria, and I run into another lobbyist that I know that has nothing to do with us. And he goes, "You're the guy, aren't you?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "You're the one that got into it with this particular." I go, "I didn't do anything." But the problem is, I had on that particular day, I had on a neon green golf shirt.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm going to sell it at our next auction because I've not worn it back to the Capitol since then.
Well, and unbeknownst to us at the time, the representative involved had a really bad morning. He had been spanked on the floor of the House on a third reading, which is almost unheard of. And so and it was like, that was right before someone handed him a card saying, "Hey, somebody'd like to talk to you." And so it was like, light the fuse, watch the
It
bomb
was a bad
explode.
day.
Here is Scott Walstad.
Yes, I was the punching bag. Yes, I was.
And we talk about that maybe a couple of hundred times a session.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I've actually told people that's what caused you to lose your hair.
No, having 3 daughters has caused me to lose my hair. And being legislative committee chairman for 16 years.
Okay. There is a limit on how much you can whine, and you have now exceeded your
I didn't even whine.
Oh,
I've enjoyed it.
We could do a poll right now, and I promise you, a majority of people say, yes, he's a whiner.
No. Go ahead.
Okay, so we have several bills that we were concerned about for bail issues, and none of them passed during the regular session.
No.
I mean, Huffman's bills made it all the way to the floor of the House a couple of hours before the deadline. And then suddenly, mysteriously, when they reached the floor, they were postponed and postponed till September. And what does that mean when that happens?
Well, it means exactly what you just said. They postponed them until September or until the next special session.
Well, but they had to be voted out of the floor by midnight. And so to postpone them meant they're dead for that session.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were just a lot of controversy, in particular with the constitutional amendment. As we all know, or maybe we don't all know. The constitutional amendment requires 2/3 vote in the Senate, 2/3 in the House. I don't believe they had the votes in the House at that particular time to get the constitutional amendment out. Be that as it may, because she was carrying both and they were both hers, I think the constitutional amendment kind of dragged down the other bill. It's politics.
We also say, the more the legislature, the two houses are fighting, and at the end of the session, they're always fighting. And so at the end of the session, when they're fighting like that, it gets to be very difficult if they don't compromise. And they had not reached a compromise on those two bills. But that was the second attempt. That was the second session for the SJR. And I would say it was less likely to pass this time than it was last session. Would you agree?
I gave it a better chance
You
this
did.
session than I
You did,
did.
because you said it
Uh,
had a 60-40% chance, and
I
I had
know,
50-50 at best.
and because they didn't vote on it, I didn't lose a bet to you because we had a bet on that probably, like we do on all this stuff.
And who's
So
winning on those bets? Let's just kind of stop and
um,
have a little commercial for there. Oh,
you,
okay.
I'll admit it. Um,
Wait, let
but
me do my
that
little victory
doesn't
dance. Yes, it's me.
no, but that doesn't mean that you're right more than I am. It just happened to be that you were more right than me on those particular, bets.
Uh-huh. I
The
think
other
we had a
the
bet that
other
you wouldn't
90%
take that
of
would
them
have
are
doubled or nothing, and I would and you wouldn't take it.
okay.
And
That's a whole totally different subject, and that
uh,
has nothing to
okay,
do with what we're talking about.
so we've talked about the legislative session that was, and
Yeah,
nothing really happened in those in the regular
correct,
session for Bell, because right at the last minute, 2 hours before the deadline, the main bills were postponed until after midnight, so they died. We have
correct,
had now two special sessions. So let's talk
correct,
about the special, the legislative session that is, and that's all about property tax reform.
correct. I mean, actually, the governor had vetoed many bills from the Senate. I believe they were Senate bills um, because he was upset that they couldn't get property tax reform taken care of. Anyone that's read anything, whether it's your local newspaper or if you get online and read anything from the Texas Tribune over the last 4 months, I mean, we all know that property tax reform was on the very top of the list of issues, probably for all the top three, whether it be the lieutenant governor, the governor, and the speaker. They couldn't come to a compromise. Um, the governor was not happy. He vetoed a bunch of bills because of that. Um, they called back, a special session, the first special session, we all know. Um, the House came in, they passed the House version, and they immediately adjourned sine die.
Sine die
Um,
means they're done. So it's
they're done.
almost, they turned around and told the Senate, take it or leave it.
That's it. Um, the Senate continued to work. I believe, as we've heard and we've read, they tried to work with the House during that first special. It just didn't happen. Um, Fortunately for homeowners and property owners, they came back the second session and got a compromise, and that's been taken care of. But a lot of issues have not been addressed. We're going to be talking about school vouchers. We're going to be talking about teacher pay raises.
All the
Coming up.
bills that were been vetoed.
Yeah, all the bills that have been vetoed. But the one thing that's entering into this whole again about time, um, we have an impending trial against the attorney general. So as soon as the last session was done, the governor gave them all time off, tried to prepare for the trial, excuse me, that's going to be going forward in the Senate. And I mean, you talked earlier about taking all the oxygen out of the room. I mean, that's right now, that's the whole thing. I mean, it's all about, Ken Paxton.
Well, so we've talked about the legislative session that was, is, and then what it will be. And so, next month is going to be, well, the next 2 months is almost going to be exclusively
Month and a
dealing
half.
with the impeachment trial, because they can start filing pretrial motions at the beginning of August. So we're going to be dealing with that for 2 months. And then, what are we hearing about other special sessions?
Well, obviously, the governor can call special sessions all the way up to the start of the next session. For the next year and a half, year and a quarter, I guess it is something like that.
Yeah, but we're
Um,
hearing that there's going to be a special session plan,
there
that
will
there
be a
is one
special
planned.
session. Yeah, there is one planned for October. I mean, there are some real meat and potatoes issues that they didn't get addressed. Again, we talked about it earlier. School vouchers, teacher raises, those are going to be on the top of the docket. Um, there are a lot of other issues. Now, we've been told by some of our third party, people that we talk to, that bail will be put on that October um, special session. It's one of those things for me. I want to see it first because there are a lot of issues.
Mm-hmm.
We've been through other special sessions before in the past. I mean, with the amount of issues that are going on and that need to be addressed, I've never really seen any more than 3 or 4 particular items on a
Yeah.
special session call. So we'll just have to see. I mean, obviously, we'll prepare. We've been told October. We'll prepare that like it's October, and we'll be ready in October, and probably really we'll be ready, a month before that.
Well, even
Um,
before we heard any or were given any direction, we were hearing, or we were debating amongst ourselves. We were thinking it would be October because the trial would be over, and then they would have their next special session. We were debating, is it just going to be vouchers and teacher raises? Or are they going to throw all these 60, 70, 80 bills that have been vetoed in there with it? Or is it going to be everything because we've got November is Thanksgiving, December's Christmas. So you've got a limited window when you can do things. And so we were kind of having that debate, and we still don't know what's going to happen. But I would expect, and it's kind of my guess, that we're going to have everything thrown in October to see if we can get it done in that month.
so, and that's the whole point. It's 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. Again, it's all about time,
Yeah.
and what is the hierarchy of the pecking order of issues that we really want to address within that 30 days.
Well, and the governor sets the agenda, and he issued a
Yeah,
tweet, I think in June, either June or July. I think it was June the 13th. He issued a tweet saying, "We're having this issue," described a situation that happened in Houston again,
Houston.
and said, "Because of this, I will put bail on an future agenda for a special
That's
session."
true.
So he's committed to put bail on a special session to address some issue, but I'm assuming it will encompass SB 13 or 1318 or those
Hmm.
issues.
Well, that and the constitutional amendment.
Well, and that was going to be my next question. If you could talk to Huffman for a moment, it seems like to me, yeah, that's pretty big, tall order that we get that the special opportunity to talk to her. But I mean, I would almost be saying, Huffman, Moody has really he hates your SJR, and he really wants a lot to try to get it passed. He wants you to compromise on it. I mean, I wonder if she didn't propose the constitutional amendment in the session and just concentrate on the bill, whether that would, whether the representative would lose all of his leverage, because the constitutional amendment couldn't go on the ballot because the deadline's passed. It can't be
Yeah,
in there in
no,
November. So there's time to just focus on the cleanup for
I think
SB6.
that's I think that's part of the strategy. I mean, I think she's obviously got to think about that. Um, Now, there's the other thought that if she got the SJR through,
Mm-hmm.
it may not be on the ballot this November, but it would qualify for a year from November, which would be before the next session.
Mm-hmm. True.
Okay. Um, I mean, it's difficult to say. I mean, we've been in the room with the senator. We've been in the room with Chairman Moody before. Um, there are differences of opinion.
Sure.
Um, she has differences of opinion with us, like anyone else. I mean, I think she is really trying
Yeah, I agree
to
with that.
do the right thing. For those of you that don't know this, I mean, Senator Huffman was an ex-district criminal court judge in Harris County.
And an
I mean,
XDA,
in an
which
XDA,
I think is right.
ADA.
Well,
It's
okay.
ADA,
Assistant
right?
DA.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, she knows the criminal justice system, every which way, but till Sunday. Um, and she realizes that issues that are going on in particular, Harris County. She lives there. She's a senator from Harris County. And she's trying to make sure that those issues do not, one, stop in Harris County, and two, don't spread to the rest of the state.
Well, and she has a good grasp on the issue. She is willing to listen, and she's very frank with you. I mean, she's told us point blank, I understand your argument, but I can't do X because I have to get this passed.
Sure.
That's what's required. And so she's
and you know what?
honest with you.
I mean, that's all you can ask of someone, whether it be a representative, a senator, a staffer. We've learned this a long time ago. We as an industry cannot afford to mislead, lie, whatever, however you want to put it, to a senator, a rep, staff, because they will never listen to us again. Okay.
Yeah, we want to be the resource. We don't want to be the problem.
Yeah. I mean, we are very highly scrutinized. Okay, just because of who we are. I think that's one of the things that we've done exceptionally well. Whether it was, actually, that was the first rule that Tillman taught me: don't ever lie.
Oh yeah.
If you don't know the answer, just say, I don't know, but I'm going to find the answer for you and I'll get back to you. Okay. That is all you can do. And that's what we try to tell people. Don't lie. Don't mislead. Just tell them you don't know and we'll get back to you. And if I don't know the answer, I'll get someone on the phone with you that does.
Well, there is a rumor going around that after the special session that has been,
it's not a rumor,
that this will be that'll be your final swan song, and we will be a new legislative committee chair for the next legislative session.
That's that's at least at this point in time what I've been telling everyone. Yes.
No, I was going to give you the opportunity to say that's not true. I'm coming back.
And I've told my wife that. Actually, I've been telling my wife that it was my last session for the last. Did you hear? She said 10 years. I'm going to say 8. What are you doing over there?
Yeah, tell her to mind her own business. We're talking really important stuff over here, like you coming back as legislative committee chair.
And actually, you know what? She just said, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, she's like, oh, you're going to be back.
Well, I mean, I don't see you not helping and not being a resource.
No, I'll help. Oh, yeah, I'll always help. And I'm like, no, this is really it. She goes, you've been telling me that for 10 years and you keep going back to be legislative committee chairman.
I don't know how you're going to give up control, because when we say Scott has final say, Scott has final say. I mean, it's not Ken Good final say. It's not John McCluskey. It's Scott Walstad.
It's going to be Mr. or Miss XYZ the next time around. But I'll be there to help. Just like Tillman's been there for me for 16 years to help me, I'll be there to help anyone who comes in after me. But my shoes aren't as big. I do actually wear a size 9.5.
It's because you have less hair.
That's true too.
No, I'm kidding. As I run my fingers through my hair, just to emphasize it.
And I mean, and I told you before we got on this, you need a haircut.
No, I need to go home and wash my hair and blow dry it so it looks a lot better than what it does. But thank you for highlighting that. Well, no, I think I started it. So
no, it's fine.
So as you look back over your short term as legislative committee chair, one that should be extended into the future with further additional work.
Talk to my wife about that.
What would be some of the highlights that you would mention to people?
I mean, I think obviously, I think, we had a very large success early on. I mean, we had a session. I wasn't even the legislative committee chairman at that time. It was Doc Dillard. When, we passed like 6 bills in a session, and we did that for 2 sessions in a row. I mean, I think the biggest thing that I can say is that we have helped defeat every bill that was
Don't jinx it.
negative to
Don't
our
jinx it.
industry. I
Yeah.
know, up until this time, okay? I mean, you got to remember, I mean, my first session dealt with percentage bail
Mm-hmm.
right out of the gate. Senator Wentworth passed a bill to allow percentage bail to be posted at the jail.
Well, he
And that
didn't pass
was,
it. He filed it.
he filed it, he had a hearing,
Mhm.
and we got that, put to bed, so to say, so to speak, I should say. But, I think there are always more negative bills than there are positive bills in our industry. I mean, there are some tweaks that we'd like to get done, um, but they never, ever outweigh the negative bills that are filed against us, okay, or filed against our industry, I should say.
Well, for the
And
last
so,
several years, we've had some key people that have always gone to the legislative session, and I think some of them are the unsung heroes. And I think one of them that I always mention is John McCluskey, because he has this ability that you or I or Mike Burgess doesn't have. He has
we
this
don't have
ability
it.
to bring people to the table to compromise or to find something that we can all agree to. And I don't know how he does it, but I mean, I can't do that.
Like I tell him all the time, I go, everyone loves John McCluskey. You can't find anyone that doesn't like John. Whereas 90% of the people don't like me
Yeah, I agree with
because
that.
for the last 16 years I tell a lot of people no, this is why we can't do something,
Mhm.
or no for something else. I mean, it just comes with the territory. Um, but John's always there. He's always positive. He's always there whenever we need him. I mean, it is really a team effort. I mean, we point out John, but all the people that come to Austin for
Mhm.
for any of the reasons that we ask them to come, whether it's just visit the Capitol, whether it's to come and do sign cards in opposition or in favor of a bill, and they might have to drive 2, 3, 4 hours just to take a minute
Mhm.
to fill out a card or do the registration in support or opposed to a bill.
Well, it seems
Um,
like from our conversation today that 80% of our work is done at the committee level.
oh, absolutely.
Because if
There's
we
no
can't
doubt.
impact it, kill it, or change it in the committee level, it's almost impossible to get done then.
It might be 90%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that's where everything starts and where the rest of the process, the big part of the process starts. Because you have to remember, again, 8,000 bills. Every representative can't know every bill that
Sure.
comes to the floor. So when a member of leadership or a member of the committee or the committee chairman is carrying a bill, and they're laying a bill out on second reading in front of the entire chamber, I mean, they're going to say, oh, well, he knows what he's talking about. This must be a good bill.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's where we have our people go talk to their reps, and they're the ones that can ask questions at the back mic. Go to them and just ask them, can you postpone this? We want to talk to you a little bit more. We have some concerns. You know, every rep, they can't read every word of every bill that's filed and that gets to the chamber floor. It's not, it can't happen.
I always say that bail is a personal relationship industry because we
It
have
is.
relationships with our clients, we have relationships with the courts, we have relationships with the district attorneys, the county attorneys. We have personal relationships with the legislature too. They see
Sure.
us all the time. They see us year in, year out. they see us as a resource. Like, what happened in Illinois, we got a call from one of our lobbyists and saying, we've got representatives asking us about what's going on. Can y'all prepare something that we can send to them when we get that? I mean, talk about the importance of personal relationships at the legislature.
It is the number one thing that you can have. I mean, there's nothing better than that. There's nothing better than when you go speak with your legislator and they go, let me give you my personal cell phone number.
Oh, yeah.
And what's your personal cell phone number? And when you go in and you and I went to go speak with someone, I won't mention names again, but when we finished that meeting talking about the Ann Johnson bill, he specifically said, I want to know from you what happens with that situation.
That's right. Yeah.
And I was communicating back and forth with him through text, and that's a relationship that started, and he's not even my rep. He was at that 8 years ago, but he's not anymore with redistricting. But, I still have that relationship with him, and I have the relationship with my new rep.
Sometimes being legislative committee chair is a thankless job. You get blamed for everything wrong that goes on, or you get blamed because PBT didn't do enough. Or I know we have one member that has said multiple times, why can't we just fix this? Why are we at the legislature every 2 years? Why can't we just fix this? And what would you say to those comments?
Wow. That's a loaded question.
Of course, that's why I asked it.
Well, I mean, part of being legislative committee chairman, and I think Tillman would probably echo this or repeat it. I mean, you have to prioritize what's best, not just for the county that I might write bail in or Tillman writes bail in. I mean, you have to strike a balance between what's best for the entire state. Okay. And, I mean, I could have passed, or we could have passed years ago, a bunch of bills that could have helped me in the counties I write in, or John writes in, or Doc writes. I mean, but that's not what you do. I mean, we represent an association that represents the entire state, whether it's bail bond board counties, whether it's criminal code counties. I mean, we represent, whether they're members or not, we represent every bail bondsman in the entire state. And that's what you have to think of first.
And what would you say to the people that say, why do we fight every year or every 2 years? Why can't we just fix this?
Well, there are some things that can't be fixed. There are some things that,
well, we can fix this. We can fix it where we don't go back every 2 years. We can give up.
Well, that's true. And we're not going to do that.
And we're not going to do that.
Okay. I mean, the second we don't show up is the second we don't have an industry any longer. But, we talk about every person, every association only has just so much capital, is an issue big enough to where we want to use all of our political capital to try to get something passed? Or would our resources be better served to try to get something not passed? So, a lot of people don't understand the effort that it takes to get a bill passed. The process is set up for bills to fail. Again, I reference 8,000 bills. I think on average, there are only about 300 to 400 bills out of 8,000 that get passed.
So what would your advice be to the next legislative committee chair for the professional bondsmen of Texas?
Okay, good question, and I've got the answer.
Okay, well, good. I'm glad you have.
Obviously, Well, I'm going to go back and then I'll go forward.
Okay.
When I started this, we didn't know what we were doing. John and Doc and myself, we showed up in the Capitol, and you got to remember at that time we hired 3 new lobbyists at the time. Um, they didn't know anything about the bail bond business. So we're trying to teach them about the bail bond business while we're trying to learn the legislative process.
Mm-hmm.
And, all we knew what to do was to walk into all those committee offices and smile and introduce ourselves and start shaking hands and kissing babies and talking. I mean, that's all we knew.
Mm-hmm.
Um, things have changed a little bit. We've got a great troika of lobbyists. Joe Valenzuela's been there with us almost all the way for the last 16 years. Jesse Ansira, who we got, 3 sessions ago. Logan Spence, extremely knowledgeable, extremely, knowledgeable of the process. Um, they know everyone. There's not anyone that doesn't know them. So my advice would be listen to our lobbyists. They know now enough about our business to know the things that concern us. Listen to the lobbyists. Do what they tell you to do. Listen to, everyone that's been there before. Myself, John, Doc, all the people that have been down in Austin before. Just listen. I'm not telling you that's what you got to do, but we have a lot of knowledge, some good, some bad. Take the good, get rid of the bad, and just do your thing. I mean, it's a people thing. Get in, shake hands, introduce yourself.
Well, when you're the legislative committee chair, you're being pulled in a bunch of different directions. I mean, I would say you've got influences from corporations, you've got influences from regions,
Sure.
you've got influences from friends, you've got influences of, I mean, you're just getting pulled in every direction. When that happens, how do you make the decision on which way to go?
This is the way I think of it. If it's good for bondsmen in the entire state, that's what we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
We address bills that, sometimes certain bills affect only certain jurisdictions. They'll cookie cutter them out or put a population limit on it so it only affects a certain county. Um, we used to not really have anything to do, early on when we started doing this. I mean, we really didn't have anything to do with, criminal code counties, you know. But then we started seeing, you know, some legislation coming in on, those criminal code counties. We're like, no, 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 we don't want to do that. That's
Mm-hmm.
not good for those people in those
Mm-hmm.
areas. Um, so we've really tried as much as we can to professionalize our business, make
Yep.
everyone
I appreciate it.
accountable
Mm-hmm.
around the state. We always want to make sure that rules apply to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
That some rules don't apply here or there or wherever it might be. We want a streamlined system so that when I post a bond in Dallas County, but that guy's in jail for a charge out of Callahan County, we want to make sure the rules apply the same in Callahan County as they do in Dallas County. We want a level playing field. Um, I mean, I think that's what I really go with. We don't go with what's best for Dallas County or what's best for Harris County. We really, really just want to do what's best for the state of Texas.
All right. Well, I think we'll close it here. And I want, first of all, I want to thank you for your service for, I mean, we've been doing this a long time together. I mean,
We have.
I mean, I don't know how I've put up with you this long. I mean, you're a pain in my side.
Let me tell you something. Okay? But between the Jack in the Box runs, the McDonald's or the Whataburger that I've been on a speakerphone with you when we've been talking 20,000 times during a legislative session. I mean, the importance that you play to what we do, and for those of you that might watch this, I don't know, we can't do what we do without Ken Good.
Whatever. Well, but thank you for talking to us
But
about
by the way, I need that white paper by tomorrow. Okay. I'm kidding.
Yeah, you are a son of a gun. But I will say this: I've enjoyed working with you as legislative committee chair. I don't think I really knew you before that, and suddenly I was active in PBT, active in the legislative committee, and we've talked daily for many years since
Yeah.
then, and so I know all your warts. I know where everything is hidden. I'm getting paid
No,
off
you
so that I won't tell anybody, and so I'm going to retire off of that, and so.
don't. Okay. You won't retire for long.
We're going to miss you as legislative committee chair. I know you're still going to be available to tell us what we're doing wrong, and we appreciate that you'll be able to tell us what we're doing wrong. But it's been a good run. It's just sorry. I'm just so sorry that you're getting so old, and that you
I
need
am.
to take some
I
time
am.
off.
You
But
know, instead of going every week, I just want to go every third week during the session.
I have made a list that I'm going to fix into email to you of all the drugs that I have discovered that will help you grow hair. So hopefully,
You know what? I've been without hair for so long. I don't know if I'd really want it back.
well, and the scary thing is, I don't know how long I've known you, but it's only in this legislative session I started calling you Mr. Clean. I was like, why have I not been using that for years?
Dude, you're so late to the game on that.
Yeah, I know. All right. Well, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so
All right,
much for
brother.
being our guest. I don't know why. You're a terrible person, but it's worked out pretty good.
All right, brother. Love you.
Love you. Bye.
Thank you for listening, and come back for the next episode of The Bell Post.